Alright everyone, it's time for a very funny and very telling Biden tweet here. I've got it archived in the description. Always use archive.today. When you send me news tips, archive them first. I don't want to give them a click and, stuff like that. When I'm speaking to foreign leaders, I'm telling them America is going to be back. We're going to be back in the game, says Joe Biden. Now this is hysterical. On the face, now, didn't we have a national conversation about Donald Trump speaking to foreign leaders before January 20th as though it was some sort of problematic thing and evidence of foreign election interference? What leaders are you talking to, Joe? I want to know which countries have their hands in your pockets and probably in the front too. I want to know that because apparently it's problematic. Now, I'm being tongue-in-cheek. It's normal for a president-elect, which Joe Biden isn't, by the way. He has not been certified as the winner. It's normal for these figures to begin conducting informal diplomacy before they're actually in office. Now, I still believe there's a chance that Joe Biden doesn't even end up president-elect. It's probably going to have to go before SCOTUS. I think you do have enough. It was funny, the New York Times the other day, there's no widespread fraud in the election. A nice use of weasel words. Widespread. You don't need widespread fraud when 100,000 votes can flip the whole fucking country when 150 million people voted. That's not widespread fraud. Irregularity here, a couple of glitches, somebody filled out a couple ballots, somebody harvested a half a dozen. You only need sporadic examples of that to happen in a handful of states. And by the way, if there's a reason to do that, it's going to be done. It's just a matter of whether it flipped anything. We're still investigating. It's very funny, because if you read the context of this, what it sounds like is basically we're going to reverse the Trump foreign policy. The Trump foreign policy has been he hasn't started any new wars. He's the first Republican president to do that in quite some time. You remember W? He hasn't expanded ground operations in any of the theaters we're in. In fact, has scaled that back considerably. It's funny when people talk about drone strikes. See, here's the problem when you're talking about drone strikes. If you're conducting them with the will of a country with a weak central government but that wants you there, I realize I'm not a big fan of doing that because I don't like world policing. But if you're essentially operating on behalf of a foreign state that has been duly elected, it's a bit more of a gray area and it's not technically war. I realize some people say, well, Sticks is a warmonger. It's not what I'm saying, but it's differentiated from invading a country that doesn't want you there. It's not the invasion of Iraq or Afghanistan, in other words. It's funny because we're now working with the fucking Taliban. I'm not comfortable about that either, Don. That being said, that's been his policy. His foreign policy has been, hey, we want our allies, at least on paper, to pay their fair share within the context of our military arrangements. They were supposed to be doing that anyway, but they incrementally lowered their rates below what was expected, and because it was incremental and because they were our allies, former presidents never bothered them about it. The problem is if you added those sums up, it was billions and billions of dollars. Trump said cut it out. By and large, they restored their funding, and we saved a boatload of money. His reformulation of our military has been, I would say, quite good as well. Our military, he used the term badly depleted when he took office. I wouldn't say necessarily badly depleted as much as highly regulated and bureaucratized to the point of incapability of using its capabilities that were there in quite so efficient a way. Obama was a fan of drone strikes, as is any president these days, unfortunately, but he really seemed to have sort of a contempt for the average soldier. He really did. Didn't really see them as useful and wanted to retool the military into a sort of technological apparatus without realizing that you still do need, you do need people to sit on the street corner, so to speak, if you're holding territory. You can't do that just with machines. The technology, at least right now, is not there. Joe Biden is essentially saying, we're going to softball China on trade. We're not going to hardball them anymore. We're not going to lean on Europe to not buy Russian gas. By the way, why would we want them buying their gas? We should sell them our own fuel. Benefits the U.S. economy. The U.S. president and the government of the United States, ultimately, at the end of the day, it's great to have allies and it's great to be nice to other nations when possible. Certainly not to invade them unless you absolutely have to. But you got to look out for your own country first. And that's what Donald Trump in foreign policy has done. That's what Obama and Bush never did. And what Beijing Biden will presumably not do if he actually gets rigged in there. He's a globalist. Again, his money's all over the world in such a way that he doesn't really care what happens to the U.S. economy. He realizes the world functions as an economic whole. So as long as the world economy in general remains stable and continues to grow, and you curb stomp any rogue states that try to gain independence from the globalistic economic system, as long as you can do that, as long as everyone is under the thumb of one of the major players, which right now by and large they are, or they're outside of the economy at large and they're basically sub-third world to the point of irrelevancy, as long as that happens, you can always make money. The elites always stay elite. They might move from country to country once in a while, but they're still rich. They don't get, Joe Biden's worth tens of millions of dollars, funny money. He can go to where the going's good. He doesn't have to suffer. If the U.S. economy goes into a slump, he can invest in China. He can invest in India or something. This is how these people operate. This is multinationalism. This is globalism. It goes well beyond the swamp. It's not just about the swamp. These people, they're swamp creatures in one sense, because they tend to be U.S. homegrown, or certainly Western world homegrown, but they don't have the same kind of national loyalty as someone who has to function within their nation of birth or the nation they've moved to long-term or for their life. The average person, 99.9% of the population, will live and die in the same country. They don't have the ability, to leave the U.S. you have to pay to renounce your citizenship, by the way. They don't have the money, they don't have the time, they don't have the inclination, or generally the capability of that mobility. The globalists do. Most of these people are dual or citizens already. They have dual citizenship with the UK or France, Israel, China, all sorts of nations. Well, then they don't have any national loyalty, technically speaking. These people's investments are shared all around the world, and they don't care as long as they make their dosh. That's what Biden wants to do. And the thing is that Trump doesn't agree with that. He's got foreign investments too, but he primarily is looking out for the U.S. economy, U.S. diplomacy, the America First sort of ethos, populism, quasi-nativism at times. They try to call it isolationism. Dude, we could use a little bit more isolationism in some aspects of our foreign policy. It's all well and good if a rogue state decides to harass shipping vessels to send in the U.S. Navy as the guarantor of the world's shipping lanes. That's perfectly fine. Fighting pirates is perfectly fine. Fighting militias on behalf of foreign states that have asked us explicitly for help is fine. Sending troops in to restore order when you've got genocide going on, which Western nations are reluctant to do. Remember Darfur back in the 2000s? That was the big thing for the millennials at the time. That's fine too. But the idea of all of the invasions and world policing thing, it just doesn't make sense. It's like when they talk about Iraq and they justify like the Iraq War and they say, well, Saddam was a dictator. Well, he was. He was brutal. Yeah. He was a warmonger. Yeah, arguably, although in some cases he wasn't necessarily the aggressor, the antagonist. In fact, he was a U.S. ally for a while. We actually gave him logistic support to launch chemical weapons against Iranian targets in the 1970s. Most people don't even know that happened. But then in the 80s, he became a bad guy again because he said, well, now that Iran's on the side burner, I'm going to have peace in my region and invade Kuwait and stuff. I want those oil fields that are rightfully mine under my mandate, says Saddam Hussein. That sort of action, when we end up mass invading foreign countries, is largely unhelpful. The only justification is, well, this rogue state would have ripped apart the world order, bullied neighboring nations around, and made life difficult for everyone else in the world by attacking trade lines or throttling the oil supply. Maybe so. There are usually diplomatic solutions to these problems that don't involve spending $3 trillion and killing 500,000 people. Donald Trump seems to comprehend this basic idea. He seems to comprehend proper diplomacy. The proof is in the pudding. No major wars breaking out in the Middle East. ISIS largely stomped into irrelevance at this point, including by Al-Qaeda, which thought they were horrible because they chop people's hearts out and eat them and weird shit like that. In Korea, at least to some degree, peace has broken out between the two Koreas, if not necessarily involving the United States. We've had more diplomatic relations with Russia, which is important. Russia has been relatively antagonistic in the wake of their maneuvers back into the Caucasus states back at the end of the Bush administration. During the Obama administration, Obama basically made no overtures to try to secure a reasonable framework for which we could prevent World War III, potentially, a nuclear war from breaking out. Donald Trump, to his benefit, appears to be willing to talk to these people. And that's something that the prior administration didn't do. The prior administration would rather go on TV and say, well, this person is bad. They're doing bad things. I'm not going to talk to them. That's not diplomacy. That's how you start a new Cold War. Nobody needs that. It's fucking horseshit. So yeah, Joe Biden is promising to start some wars and sell us out to foreign interests if he's elected. And watch, if he is rigged in there, that is exactly what his foreign policy will be. You won't see a new China trade deal. If anything, he'll go and he'll bow before Jinping. He'll take a knee before him like a subjugated little bitch and squander a bunch of money on foreign adventurism in some third world nation. We'll probably put more troops in Iraq, Afghanistan. Maybe we'll invade something in East Africa. Maybe we'll go invade Honduras. Maybe we'll bomb Mexico or Poland or something. Who knows with Joe Biden? He's so out to lunch, you never know what he's going to decide to do. That's about all. Peace out.